We we turn now to a call to worship by the 14th Dalai Lama. I'll ask you to read the indented parts. There are only 2 days in the year that nothing can be done. One is yesterday, and the other is tomorrow. So, today is the right day to love, believe, do, and mostly live. A morning prayer by those who wish is from Rabbi Harold Kushner, a very well-known rabbi who wrote a book, Why Bad Things Happen to Good People. I'll read the V, if you would read the R for response. Let the rain come and wash away the ancient grudges, the bitter hatreds held and nurtured over generations. Let the rain wash away the memory of the hurt, the neglect. Then let the sun come out and fill the sky with rainbows. Let the warmth of the sun heal us wherever we are broken. Let it burn away the fog so that we can see each other clearly. So we can see beyond labels, beyond accents and gender or skin color. Let the warmth and brightness of the sun melt our selfishness so that we can share the joys and feel the sorrows of our neighbors. And then all together, and let the light of the sun be so strong that we will see all people as our neighbors. Let the earth, nourished by rain, bring forth flowers to surround us with beauty. And let the mountains teach our hearts to reach upward to heaven. Amen. And Oscar, if you would. Oscar, you have to unmute.
I thought that.
There we
okay.
go.
Too loud is okay.
Go ahead. From the book of Job, my cousin, who often is with us from Munich, said to me, I think you'll like this better for Sunday's reading. And so I looked at it and I said, okay, I'll swap out the Job reading that I had and put it in for next time. This sounds very much like what's going on. He deprives of speech those who are trusted and takes away the discernment of the elders. He pours contempt on princes and looses the belt of the strong. He uncovers the deeps out of darkness and brings deep darkness to light. He makes nations great, then destroys them. He enlarges nations, then leads them away. He strips understanding from the elders of the earth and makes them wander in pathless waste. They grope in the dark without light. He makes them stagger like a drunkard. And then if you'd read with me the responsive reading from the 14th Dalai Lama, if you would read that which is in bold, dark print. We have bigger houses, but smaller families. More convenience, but less time. We have more degrees, but less sense. More judgment, but more knowledge, but less judgment. More experts, but more problems. More medicine, but less healthiness. We've been all the way to the moon and back, but have trouble crossing the street to meet the new neighbor. We build more computers to hold more information, to produce more copies than ever, but have less communication. We have become long on quantity, but short on quality. These are times of fast food, but slow in digestion. Tall men, but short on character. Steep profits, but shallow relationships. It is a time when there is much in the window, but nothing in the room. The 14th Dalai Lama. We don't often read from the Gospel of John. This is a chapter from chapter 11, verses 32 through 35. When Mary came to Jesus, Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, Lord, if you had been there, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came to her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, where have you laid him? And they said to him, Lord, come and see. And Jesus began to weep. A reading from the Gospel of John. And Oscar, if you would. Let us pray. Grant us, we ask, to speak, to hear, and to learn, so that our fears may be banished, our minds may become enlightened, our faith be increased, and our steps directed towards you. Amen. I want to start out by saying a few words about how I was brought up. And I find out Maria was telling me the same thing happened in Colombia, and maybe the rest of you will feel the same thing. When I was growing up, men did not show their feelings. You kept it in. You kept it all in. You didn't say anything. And I remember there was a movie in, I think, 1939 that showed the epitome of this nonsense. The British Army was in the Sudan trying to liberate Gordon. It was this long line of khaki soldiers, and they're standing there, and they are facing 50,000 very angry soldiers of the Mahdi on camels, attacking them full speed. And the one guy says to the other, there you go, lad, stiff-lipped now, we're fine, we're fine. I think, are you out of your mind? You're being attacked by 50,000 guys on camels, you're not fine. Stiff upper lip, what are they thinking about? So I was told, you always keep it in, you don't show emotions, you're fine. Well, things aren't always fine. And today is a perfect example. We'll get to that in a minute. You keep it in at all costs, no emotions. You show you keep that in. And when women got emotional, it was understood they're being emotional. It's okay, they can go weep and cry, but it's embarrassing when they let go. So you put the women over to the side, you make excuses to your friends, she's being emotional. Meanwhile, you're dying on the inside, but you say nothing. So I said to Marie, I said, growing up Anglo was a pain in the neck. God forbid you show emotions. She said, do you think in Colombia it was any different? Men were not supposed to cry. I said, seriously? The Colombians got nailed too. She said, absolutely. And I see Serge shaking his head. I guess others grew up the same thing, that men are not supposed to show emotion. Wherever we got this, I have no idea. Notice Jesus had no problem weeping. I find this fascinating. He says we want to follow Jesus as an example. Jesus let loose many times when he was not fine and said so. We read that, but nobody seems to want to copy that. So we take a look today, and I remember when the first time I was seriously challenged at that is when I went off to rehab. And if you said fine, it came down on your head. You're there and everybody's recuperating from all kinds of stuff. And I remember somebody said, I'm fine. And everybody yelled, no, you're not fine. And it turns out fine, think of the F word, or if you don't like that, think of flogged or flayed, insecure, neurotic, and extreme. Or if that doesn't work, the F word, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. So when you're fine, that's exactly what you are. You're insecure, neurotic, emotional, extreme. You're all over the place. Don't tell you're fine. Today is not a day to be fine. It's not a day to hold emotions in. Enough already. I learned over the years that when you hold your emotions in, the only one you're really hurting is yourself. There are times we have no trouble laughing, but doggone it all, we have a lot of trouble letting loose with crying. We have a lot of loose with good anger. Not all anger is good, but there is some anger that needs to be done. That's the other thing. We're all taught anger's bad. Bad, bad, bad anger. But sometimes there's good anger. To use an Old Testament phrase, there's righteous anger. And now is a very, very good time to talk about it's not fine. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to have some righteous anger. And so I divided up the share into two parts. It came to me the other morning, I was going to jam too much in, and it said to me, no, let's talk about the social, it's not okay. And then next time on the 28th, we'll talk about the internal, it's not okay. So today, as we look at what's going on, we see Black Lives Matter, but you'll also know this is true for Brown. Brown as well. And let's remember also, you saw what happened over the week, the last 2 days. God forbid you're transgender. That's been wiped out. LGBTQ, we've got members here who are LGBTQ. This doesn't count anymore. You're wiped out from health. And what about, here's one for you, poor whites. Poor whites, we forget there are poor whites. And what about Asians? Thanks to certain comments about China, our Asian Americans are being beaten up on the streets. So it's just a lovely, lovely time. Did you see where the guy the other day who was on an alum from Saturday Night Live was out jogging? He saw the cops come up, so he takes out a video, records this. They throw him on the ground, handcuff him. He says, "You've got the wrong guy." And then what did they do? They realized a minute later they did. They didn't. They said, "Well, sorry about that," and take off. I mean, that's it. They humiliated somebody. Now, if that had happened to a white person of a certain class, you better believe all would have broken loose. Let's talk about Black Lives Matter, Brown Lives Matter, LGBTQ lives matter, poor people's lives matter, everybody's life matters. It's about time to realize that in this country, we've all known this. You've known it, I've known it. But I think what's different this time is, my observation, maybe I'm wrong, is because we've got videos out there. You can't, it used to be somebody got slammed, their neck was on, and it was their word against the policeman's word. The court always sided, if it was your word against the cops, always sided with the cops. There was no other way. If there were witnesses, the witnesses were biased. But when you see it on film, and you see it on a body cam, and you see 4 witnesses from 4 different points of view showing the same thing, you can't say, oh, it didn't happen. And so now that you're seeing this all over the place, people now are reflecting upon things that have happened to them. And now finally we're getting, it's not fine, thank you very much. People don't realize, I think we all do actually, but we really kind of put it out of our minds. When I'm teaching class, the first one to really talk about free will, believe it or not, is Zoroaster. Zarathustra lived probably 3,500 years ago. He grew up in what we now call Iran, the very northern part of Iran. His ancestry was part of that group that went into what we now call India and began the roots of Hinduism. His was the first writing, oddly enough, about free will, believe it or not, about 3,500 years ago. And I said to my students, do we really have all the freedom we think we have? Think about this. When you pop out of the womb, do you have any say? Now think about this, about the texture of your hair. Do you have any say about the color of your hair? Do you have any say about the color or texture of your skin? Do you have any say about the class into which you were born or the neighborhood into which you're going to be raised? All of that right off the bat means you have very little say about major components of who you are. That's a lot, folks. And then when you think about the neighborhood in which you're growing up, over which you had no say, that depends also about the kind of school system you go to. So that means you're talking about your schooling, your formative years, all kinds of things you bring to the table about which you had no say. And then I don't know about anybody else watching this, but to live in Miami-Dade County, everybody needs to work. We've heard me say this 1,000 times. We have the highest rent in the United States, some of the lowest wages in the United States. 41% of people's income in this county goes towards mortgage or rent. And we've got 25% of the county living in poverty. Yes, that's some reality there. So it takes two people to work, and we've got terrible wages here. So you're missing formative years. It's being grown up. You're in a neighborhood, and you have no say about any of that. And think about that, how that works. Now let's take a look at some of the neighborhoods in Miami-Dade County. These are neighborhoods that people tend to forget exist. Goulds, Princeton, Naranja. Yeah, these are major. You add up the people, you're talking 40,000 people. And we could go on and on and on. Allapattah, certain sections of Allapattah, certain sections of the roads. We can go on and on and on. Certain sections of Little Haiti. We can go on and on and on. We've got major areas here where people are grown into a community and the babies born into these have no say about this whatsoever. Take a look at schools. We have the Miami-Dade Public County School System. I guarantee you, if you go down and look at the classrooms and the equipment in Goulds, it will be significantly different than in Coral Gables. Yes. Yes, Coral Gables. Yes, fine Coral Gables. Very fine place to live. You will not find the equipment in Goulds the same as it is in Coral Gables. So you grow up black or brown. You're born black or brown with a certain texture of skin and color. You're born into a lower class community. You're getting schools that don't have the same equipment. And by the way, I was shocked. I know you've heard me say this for the last 4 sermons, but I'm really annoyed at myself. I find it hard to believe how many of our students have no internet. Now, I should have known this. I still can't get over how dumb I am. Do you know how much internet costs? Of course you do. Those of you who get internet, you spend $1,000 a year on the internet, maybe $1,500. If you're both low-income families, who can afford that kind of money? If you have no internet, you have no Wi-Fi. If you have no Wi-Fi, how are your kids then supposed to keep up? Because virtually everybody's supposed, we think, to have a laptop. Your not so brilliant minister here, not so brilliant at all, would go by this building in building 2 at Miami-Dade College. The bottom floor is all computers for students. It's packed. Do you think I ever asked myself, why are all these free computers packed? They're packed because none of these kids have computers. That's why. Never crossed my mind. I can't believe how ignorant I can be. So you've got people living in immense poverty. They don't have internet. They don't have laptops. And so right off the bat, they are already in trouble with catching up with what's going on for education. Now, this cuts across the board. You can be poor white, you can be poor black, you can be poor brown, you can be just plain poor. And this impacts things. It also impacts your diet, what you eat. And when both people are working, you wind up eating a lot of fast food, which, as you well know, is not good for you. But if that's all you can do and that's what you've got, you know, you've got to take a look at that. You can't be judgmental when you're not in somebody else's shoes and they're barely making ends meet. And what kind of role models? I remember several years ago when I was in the ministry, I want to say 3 decades ago, and now it's repeated itself. A lot of young people had babies and then went and got addicted to all kinds of substances. And we had a plague of little children being raised by 70 and 75-year-old grandmothers and grandfathers. Did any of you remember that? Now we've had a crystal meth and an opioid addiction. And who do you think is raising those kids again? Grandparents who themselves have health issues. All right, I'm not finished. So you have poor income, poor schooling opportunities. You have no support to stay in school. You have not very much laptop or internet connections. You have very little money. What kind of job are you going to get? What kind of job are you going to get? And then you get a place like Texas, which prouds itself on the fact that they've got the largest group of people in the United States who have no health insurance. Are you putting all this together? And so when you put this all together, who comes out fine? You comes out fine if you're upper middle class, or you've got somebody who's got a degree who's making kinds of money. Do you realize only 29% of the people in this country have a college degree? That's 70% of the people have no college degree, who puts them at huge risk for jobs, job income, huge risk for having little health insurance. And then we wonder why all hell is breaking loose. Then we take a look at the police. And some of you may have remembered, I see we have some people here from Port Orange. They'll remember I was a hostage negotiator. And the first year, now Hal and Linda and Tom and Gail wouldn't have known this, but the first year I came to Port Orange, I volunteered my whole year at the Tomoka State Correctional Institution. The church I went to was very, very tiny. And so I remember reading in Gospel of Matthew that Jesus said, when did you do this? Did you do the least of these, my brethren, when I was in jail, etc. I thought, I've never done anything with jail. So I went out to volunteer for a year at Tomoka. And I wound up because the chaplain did not think I was a man of God. And I was about ready to hit the chaplain. And I thought, that's no good. So going out, the warden said to me, you have the credentials for being a psychologist. Listen to this. The campus, that's what they call it. The campus had 2,500 inmates. They were supposed to have, ready for this now, 1,200. They were supposed to have 5 psychologists full-time. They had 1. Are you getting that? So I volunteered 1 day a week. It was interesting what I learned. You know the way I am. I'm not quite right. The guard said to me, you are probably the only person who can walk around here totally safe. You broke up a riot between Hispanics and blacks by walking in the middle of this huge mess, taking off your shoes and sitting down between 2 very hostile groups. And you said to everybody, all right, one at a time, let's discuss this, because if we don't, the SWAT team's going to come in and hurt everybody. And they listen to you. So you can walk anywhere. Sadly, I couldn't continue that after a year because the church grew, but I got to see police, I got to see profiling in real action. And I got to see what poor income, no education, poor diets do. I got to understand why people take drugs. and the escape that it offers, though it's temporary and disastrous. I got to see all that, not intellectually, but actually there, once a week, day in and day out. I would have people come in and talk to me. And man, it was scary. I will tell you, when you're looking at somebody in the eyes, face to face, it was different. The police do have a we versus them mentality, a lot of them. And there's a lot of bad cops. You better believe it. And I remembered the SWAT team hated me because it was my job to see nobody got hurt. And if you ever saw a SWAT team in action, I'll just simply say the adrenaline gets high. The paint comes on. All this testosterone and stuff. And I would come in, and my job was to be really sure that nobody got hurt, and I never lost a person. And I did some really weird stuff. I remember this one time they were ready to rush in. This poor kid, he was 17 or 18. He had gone off his medicine. And I won't say anything else except the fact I walked in and sat down in the kitchen when he had a knife out. And I said, now look, this is what's going to happen. I can't tell you what's going on. I said, come with me in the car. I will drive you to the hospital. They'll be waiting for you. Nobody will hurt you. The SWAT team was furious. Everybody was mad at me. He got into my car. I drove him to the hospital. We got to the hospital. The doctors are waiting for him. The nurses are waiting. And he went up and he got the care he needed. They would have been happy to stomp on him. I've been in other situations. They've been glad to hurt people. Obviously, I was not very popular. So these things happen. And then somebody's mad because Confederate name tags are coming down and flags are going away. And we mentioned Juneteenth. The great orange one was going to go to Juneteenth. Now, lest I appear to be so knowledgeable, if it hadn't been Maureen Sullivan talking to me about, Kenneth, do you know about Juneteenth? I had no idea what Juneteenth was. That's why I like a congregation that's not afraid of the minister, because you guys tell me what I need to know. This was a classic example. The orange one was going to go on Juneteenth, so I looked this up. It was once called a riot. It wasn't a riot, it was a massacre, where 39 blocks were blown apart from the air and from citizens outraged about it's nobody's really quite sure what started it. Up to 150 to 300 people died in this massacre. Churches were destroyed, buildings were destroyed, lives were destroyed. And I can't even begin to imagine what he was going to say about race relations. And then let us talk about the pandemic. While we're talking about it's okay not to be okay. Latest numbers. In the United States, as of yesterday, 2,074,526 people are infected. This was a hoax, by the way. It was going to go away. And if you get the latest thing, well, you know, I said it's fine. We're going to flick the switch, and you get these states opening up right and left. If you paid attention in the last 2 days, you see 4 states are through the roof. And our own governor was told by Republicans and Democrats alike, tell us the real numbers. We're skyrocketing. In Miami-Dade County, those of you living in Volusia County are lucky. Our county is leading the state in infection rates. This is hot off the press this morning. The corona's brutal impact on African Americans and other minorities may never be fully known. Listen to this, because consistent gaps in gathering data on race and ethnicity have persisted for 4 months. Despite rising pressure on you-know-who in the administration to fix data deficits, 52% of reported corona cases in the U.S. are still missing information on race. 52%. The gaping holes weaken efforts to contain the pandemic, and they disguise the full impact of the coronavirus on minority populations. I'm furious, and you should be too. This has been going on a long time. You know this as well as I do. Every study done shown, if you take a black to court and a white to court, the chances of a black getting 3 times the sentences the white got for the same crime are right there in front of us. Every study that's been done in the last 20 years says the same thing. You know, if you're going to get in a poor neighborhood, poor diets, poor bringing up, and a poor education, you're going to have poor jobs. And that's demoralizing. Demoralizing. And if any of you have ever really been poor, you get an idea of how bad it is. By the way, believe it or not, I had a couple of poor times in my life. My first church paid $6,500 for a starting salary. This after having gone to Dickinson and Union Theological Seminary. I worked construction. Yes, me, work construction. 5 foot 9 inches and 150 pounds, work construction. It was insane. Concrete forms, no less. I learned how to balance big beams, digging ditches in the mud. I mean, my wife is going, she can't imagine, Maria's over here, I can't imagine you doing that. I did it. I remember when I was going to, I was out of the ministry for a while, and I washed cars and dug ditches. Yes, I was newly divorced, and I dug ditches and washed cars and had no money. Dudes, it's not fun. And I wasn't sure I was going to have a job. It wasn't fun. And when I left Port Orange, and I had an alcohol problem. And when I left Port Orange, I had no job, no future, no nothing. Let me make that clear. And no money. I voluntarily went off to rehab because the United Church paid for it as part of a way saying, thank you for all the years I put into ministry. And when you sit there and you realize you're old, I was 51 or 52, you have no job, no future, nowhere to go. Folks, that's about as low as you're going to get. I've been there, and it's not nice. And people do that all the time in this country. That's not unique. I don't feel sorry for my stuff at all. I got a wake-up call to the way real people live a lot of the time. Being without a job is kind of a real eye-opener. So there's no sorrow here on my part. It was, it was my fault. I knew I had an alcohol problem, and I didn't deal with it. That's the famous part of denial. Remember that thing, denial is not a river in Egypt. Oh, I made several rivers in Egypt. And there are consequences. So there are 4 things I offer. I hope Gail is laughing right now because she said, remember 4 things I came up with. I don't know why I come up with 4. We're supposed to have 3. Remember, in old times, you always had 3 points to your sermon. If you've never heard that, well, that's what you were taught long ago, far away. I got 4. Number 1, it's time for us to take a self-inventory. Everybody. What do we really know? What have we hidden? There was an article, to understand Black life, you got to be uncomfortable. You got to be uncomfortable when you understand what's going on around you. Somebody I know who's Puerto Rican and Cuban said, when she left Miami, she didn't feel comfortable stopping to get gas in some of the small towns in Florida. I got that, and I'll tell you why. I left Port Orange one time. I had to go to this meeting, and I was in a white BMW, and I had to go through Crackerville. Yes, I can say that. You can't. I had to go through a series of cracker towns, and I thought, fine, you get out of that car looking like you're upper middle class driving a BMW. Does that look good, folks? No. And I thought, if I felt uncomfortable, I can see where somebody who's Puerto Rican and Cuban and of a brown color is going to feel not comfortable at all. I get that. We need a self-inventory, number 1. Time to be really honest. Number 2, we need to share with each other, this is a mess. We need to step up to the plate. We need to share that with each other. We need to be clear out there. We have brown members, Black members, LGBTQ members. There are poor people. There are us. We have met the problem, and it is us. We need to share that. Number 3, you need to show up. Don't tell me you don't like such and such a candidate because they're old or they're sleepy. People didn't like Hillary, so they stayed home. Well, you see what you got, didn't you? I don't fault the Republicans for voting the way they wanted to vote. I fault the Democrats who felt, well, I don't like her, so therefore I'm not showing up. Well, when you didn't show up in Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania because you were high, fine, super fine with everything, you saw what happened. This time you show up. You show up. You just don't talk about it. You show up. And if you can't show up, you do like Maria and I did. Because of my heart transplant, I can't stand in line in the heat for 4 hours. I got a mail-in ballot. Order your mail-in ballots. Vote by mail. But this time, doggone it all, vote and show up. I don't want to hear any excuses from anybody about, well, I couldn't get there. Don't let me hear that. If that happens to you, you better hide. You get out there and you do something. You show up. And finally, don't let this be a one-time thing. You and I are going to have this conversation again and again and again. Not every Sunday, but we're going to stay the course this time. You know, we've got these great minds. They last about a week. We can't do that, folks. We can't do that. Now, this is like, I feel like an angry grandfather telling everybody what to do. But this is the way it is. This is the way it is. Self-inventory. Share. Get out there and vote and do it. And by doggone, we're going to stay the course. Am I clear about that? That's our role. That is our role. If you say you follow Siddhartha, do it. If you say you follow Taoism, do it. And if you're a Christian, don't even let me hear this nonsense about, oh, well, no, you do. Very, very famous Jewish letter in the New Testament, the letter of James. It says it all. Be doers of the word and not hearers only. Amen. Mahalia Jackson. When we have a time of prayer, for some, prayer is not helpful. So we also call this a time of meditation or contemplation. So depending upon your own faith journey, for those who wish to pray or for those who wish thoughts, good thoughts for those around us, we offer the following words. I wrote this for my classes when we were talking about prayer couplets. And for those who wish, let's read the following. For the poor and the unfortunate, for the sick and the suffering, for the tempted and bereaved, for the forgotten and lonely, let us offer a prayer or a thought this day and every day. May it be so. Amen. Let us have a time of quiet. do when we begin Christianity is point out that Jesus was born Jewish, lived Jewish, and died Jewish. There's no but. And often you get this, Christianity will come later, and it wasn't even called Christianity in the beginning, it was called the Way. Followers of the way of Jesus, the way of his teachings. And when Christians gather, they always remember the Last Supper, but modern scholarship has said we need to really remember it wasn't just the Last Supper, it was all the suppers Jesus had. He consistently, throughout his ministry, broke bread with people with whom you were not supposed to break bread. And what he was doing was actually echoing a very, very ancient tradition. When you were poor and you had a stranger come and visit, or you had somebody that was new, you had what you had, which was bread. So what Jesus did was echoed a very, very long tradition. And he took very, very simple bread, and he broke it, and he offered it to people, not just at the Last Supper, but throughout his ministry, offering bread and offering a cup. And the idea of the cup was that in the cup of simple grape wine and bread, you offered, if you would, a cup, and you offered this to people as an act of friendship and fellowship and blessing. And so it is that we offer a cup of blessing at home. If you're there, if you have bread, you are encouraged to take some bread and join in an act of fellowship and blessing and peace, or to use a very old Jewish word, shalom. And then we always followed that when we were at the JCC with this incredible saying, and some of you will have to remember how we did this, but we've been doing it for years. You know the way this goes. You repeat after me.
Hold on, Ken. I'm going to unmute everybody, okay?
Okay. All right, everybody's been unmuted.
Hold on. It's not, I got to get everybody out. Okay, I actually am not, for some reason it's not letting me to, so everybody's been allowed to unmute themselves, so please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, if you can unmute yourselves, and let's do the famous reading together, if you would. You know how to unmute yourselves? Okay, well, Dallas, Hal and Linda, if you can, you're going to undo this, and let's do this, everybody, like we used to do it, and let's continue to do this. Promise me you'll remember.
Promise me, remember.
You are braver than you believe.
You are braver than you believe.
Stronger than you seem.
Stronger than you seem.
Smarter than you think.
Smarter than you think.
God didn't promise.
God didn't promise.
Days without pain.
Days without pain.
Laughter without sorrows.
Laughter without sorrows.
Sun without rain.
Sun without rain.
But the divine did promise.
But the divine did promise.
Strength for the day.
Strength for the day.
Comfort for the tears.
Comfort for the tears.
And light for the way.
And light for the way.
Before we conclude, for those of you who are not used to this, and I'm not sure how we started this either, I like to say we stole it from AA and NA. The famous black chip. You see it there. There we go. The famous black chip. If you have something that's bothering you, what we used to do is you would come forward and you had to pick up a black chip with a reminder. If you're going to leave a worship service, you can't just leave with it saying, yeah, I'm going to work on it. No, you got to take a physical reminder. Now, we're reminding everybody, if you lost your black chips, we'll send you one. And Judy Homer's already sent a bunch out. So if you need a black chip, email me and your address, and you're going to get one of these things. So on a day, there we go. So does anybody need to pick up a black chip? Hold it up. Anybody need a black chip? All right, Zoraida, remind me. We'll send you one. Okay. If you have a black chip and you need to be ticked off about something, let's see it. Let's see the black chip. You know you've got a job to do. Do it. Get out there and take care of what's ever bothering you, and come back next time and show your black chip. Our concluding prayer. May the blessings of God be upon us in this hour and in the days to come, that we may seek the truth more devotedly, that we may think more independently, that we may reflect more searchingly, that we may know ourselves more completely, that we may forgive more quickly, we may pray more thoughtfully, we may act more courageously, we may live more nobly. And now let us join the Morehouse College Choir, a famous
Ken, you got it on mute.
and our final words. It's a mixture of an old Irish blessing and a Hindu thought. And now may the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. May the rains fall softly upon your fields. And until we meet again, and when we meet again, may the divine in me greet and hug the divine in you. Go in peace. Amen.